I mentioned in a video a while back that I was watching through Jujutsu Kaisen, and while I was enjoying it, I was having a few issues with it, mostly because I felt there was a problem with the character writing in the early portions of the show. So basically, yeah, I know I'm late for the ride, but Jujutsu Kaisen is a show that always seemed interesting to me, but never something that really, caught my eye to the level where I was like, okay, I gotta watch this now. I mostly decided to watch it because of the hype, the fact that people were talking about it, and it seemed pretty darn good. But mostly because I wanted to be in the conversation and see what the hype was all about. As someone who likes shonen anime a lot, I wanted to see what was up, and this is basically the big new thing right now. So I felt like I was pretty much obligated to check it out. That in mind, I went through most of season 1, and I felt like the way the series was paced just felt kind of weird. It was very to the point and objective, which if you like, the whole battle aspect of shonen, the fact that you get these cool fights with these awesome powers, I mean, this show is your jam if that's it. And like, I enjoy battles too, I enjoy some sweet animation and some cool action, you know me. But I always like it a lot more when there's a level of character attachment alongside it, or working with it to make so the fights are more dramatic or more emotional. If there are no feelings imbued beyond, look how cool this is. I might like it in the moment, but it still is not necessarily something that will stick with me in the same way, Another modern shonen that is also very much to the point with its pacing is Demon Slayer, but that, unlike Jujutsu Kaisen, has a very gripping setup that's immediately relatable and emotional with the whole, demon killing his whole family thing. It hits hard and hits fast and immediately makes you attached to Tanjiro in a way that I feel Jujutsu Kaisen just kind of doesn't do. So the setup for that is, okay, so his grandpa dies, which is supposed to be sad, but even he doesn't seem to care that much, more so just the ideological implications of that, I guess. I don't know, it's brushed off really quickly, and the big incident is that Yuji ate a finger, and now he's convicted or whatever. It doesn't hit that emotional side of me that immediately wants to get attached to the character and see where his story goes. Just sort of following along. Okay, there's this kid, he's in a predicament, a very messed up predicament, one that's maybe politically interesting, but one that emotionally doesn't feel like it's particularly personal or emotional. And I felt like Jujutsu Kaisen is one of these new shows that really tries to hone in on what makes shonen shonen while forgetting what makes shonen shonen, in the sense that, okay, it knows that what people like are the battles and the big moments, and it tries to get to those as quickly as possible because it knows that's what the audience wants, right? But at the same time, I feel like it forgets a lot of the initial appeal of these kinds of shows that, yeah, they were sort of basic. Dragon Ball, for a while now, been quote-unquote criticized for having quote-unquote bad writing or non-existent writing. I don't think that's actually the case. As someone who's been rereading Dragon Ball recently, I've been finding a whole new appreciation for how the work is done and what it tells and the characters it contains. It's not some big piece of Shakespearean tragedy, but it has some really cool moments that make you really care for the characters. And I feel like the same goes for stuff like Naruto even, and other shonen works, Hunter x Hunter, which is now one of my favorites as well since I watched through it over the past few years. And then also One Piece, which I just started reading. It nails that sense of adventure and camaraderie between the main characters. And I feel like Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't really go for that initially. So it goes as fast as possible trying to set things up. So there's a school universe with curses and all that. And then you got Yuji, who's the main guy. And in the first 10 or so episodes, he dies, right? And it's a cool, shocking thing, right? And he really does die. He comes back, but it's legit, characters think he's dead for a good while now. So it is a cool, shocking moment, just like how every big, cool moment in the show, even in season 1, I thought were pretty cool. Again, I wasn't thinking the show was bad, I was just not really getting the hype. People were saying it's the best shonen out there now, it's peak, it's fucking peak. And I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm here for the ride, but freaking Beyblade X, which has many more writing issues, had its characters with a better grip on me than Jujutsu was by the first half of the first season, more or less. I felt as if its commitment to getting to the cool moments kind of diminished the appeal of having the characters just being themselves and getting to know more about them and their motivations and their character arcs and stuff. Because hey, look at the cool power right there. when Yuji dies, they try to make this whole dramatic thing where Megumi and Nobara, they're kind of sad that, Yuji died because they think he's dead for real, for a few episodes. And they even do it in like one of the Jujutsu trolls, which are the post-end credits little skits that they have, where they have them kind of sad. Yuji used to like this food or whatever, and it's supposed to be kind of sad, but dude, you went on like 3 missions together and then he died, right? I know there's gonna be some baggage in that, some trauma and stuff, and I feel like from the way it's conveyed, there's supposed to be more stuff we don't see in between each of the big moments we watch through in the story, but I feel like not seeing that takes away a lot. We're shown that the academy does have classrooms, but it's like we never see anything from the before, during, or after most of their classes. It's just the missions all the time. I wasn't really buying the relationship between Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara for most of the first season because it felt like it wasn't really present. They were doing missions together and stuff, but like in the span of a few episodes, we went from meeting Nobara for the first time, seeing her power set, and getting hinted at their backstory, and then Yuji dying, and she's supposed to be so sad about it, and I wasn't feeling it, honestly. It felt like something was missing. Speaking of those Jujutsu trolls, you could say they are the lighter moments where we see the characters bonding, but like half of them, I don't know if it's just the humor is just not for me. They were mildly funny, they weren't bad. They were just cute little things, but a lot of people say like, oh, those are the funny moments you're looking for. But in reality, like, oh, they're kind of just there. It still feels like there's a layer of like character connection, interaction, and levity that is necessary for making a story like that hit. This is not me necessarily just wanting, make it less dark. It's not about making it less dark, but about giving the levity so the dark moments hit harder. To me, it felt like it wanted to rush to the cool dark moments, especially in season 1. In those moments, because of that, weren't really hitting so hard for me. The Junpei arc actually had a little bit of what I was looking for, because you had this kid who was going through some bullying in school, and then you had Yuji come there and be the cool guy who actually gives him attention, and they talk about movies, and it's so cute, and they have dinner with his mom and stuff. Like, that is what I was looking for. That's what I wanted Jujutsu Kaisen to do more of. They nailed that moment with a little side character who dies a few episodes later, but they, for the life of them, could not do it for the main cast for whatever reason. And it really felt like it was missing something. Again, the show was still enjoyable, but to me it just wasn't it. I wasn't feeling the hype through most of season 1. And that only is intensified by the existence of a tournament arc half a season into the show. I know, like, okay, having the tournament arc be the second major arc isn't necessarily breaking new ground. If you take a look at Dragon Ball and Naruto, they're pretty much the same thing. But with Dragon Ball, the first arc is pretty much just, just focus on an adventure story where you get to meet the characters, and it has a lot of comedy and a lot of character interaction, and you care about, at the very least, you care about Goku going into the first Tenkaichi Budokai. And in Naruto, you get the whole Zabuza arc. And I'm talking here like off of memory, because I'll be honest, I haven't watched Naruto in years. It's a show I like, but it's a show I seriously need to get back into before talking about seriously again. But I do remember that they at least got that right, where they gave the characters just, enough time to interact and do something off of the main plot, for us to have enough breathing time to care about them when the tournament arc comes, so there's more stakes and stuff. Because, the cool thing about the tournament arc is usually you get to see these characters you already like fighting against each other with their all in a scenario where, maybe there aren't that high of stakes, but it's basically a playground for seeing all these cool characters fight without worrying about, how does this fit into the story at a bigger scale. Just putting, 2 action figures to fight against each other, which sounds stupid and shallow, but in reality what it means for a shonen story, is that you get to see all kinds of unexpected fights that usually end up having emotional stakes, because you're seeing each character putting in their all so they can win whatever reason they want to win, even if they like the other character, like, okay, I need to win more than you do, so I'm gonna win. So there's a lot of like emotion involved in just seeing the characters' motivations come through and be like, okay, I'm not giving up no matter what. It's basically the characters' ideals clashing without the need for a major story event to occur to justify it. With Jujutsu Kaisen though, they just introduced like 6 characters at once, and while the tournament is going on, they start sort of introducing their abilities. In fact, like, in general, JJK kind of has, in my opinion, a bit of an issue with introducing power sets very well. Maybe I'm just dumb, and it's just hard for me to keep up with information. It's not like I ever got confused, as in like, oh, I don't know what's going on at all, right? But Jujutsu Kaisen, especially in the first season, when they're like front-loading all the information so you're up to speed on what's supposed to be happening and whatnot, a lot of that runtime is filled with explaining how this power set works, how this mechanic works, how this character fights and stuff, and very little explaining of who they are, what are they all about, and all that stuff. We get tidbits of backstories going into the second half of season 1. When we get into the tournament itself, we start getting more background information on each of the characters as the fights go on, with flashbacks and the like. And it sort of starts working from there, but since it's all at once in the middle of fights, it feels like, okay, I barely know any of you, why are you telling me this, right? It feels like it's too much. You want to make these fights cool now, so you have to do a lot of heavy lifting to make us care about the characters right in this very moment, instead of giving us a proper time to actually care about them, like, organically as the story goes. Like the very first episode of Hunter x Hunter, for example, I was already caring about the main cast, as in, you know, Gon, Kurapika, and Leorio, just from the way they work together to save that one random NPC guy, even though their ideals initially clashed, right? That's like some very poignant character building that I feel was kind of lacking in Jujutsu Kaisen. The characters are just there. They're together because they're students in the same class. They kind of have chemistry, but it isn't really explored. The ideals don't really clash or like work together in particular ways. They're just sort of like students, right? Which I guess is realistic, but it doesn't necessarily give me the most to hang on to. Beyond just being, you know, too close, I don't know why Yuji and Nobara necessarily wants to work together, right? They're just in the same class. There is that little baseball arc after the tournament arc is pretty much over, which I felt was pretty cute, and it was kind of closer to what I wanted more of, just having the characters talk to each other, interact, to see what their deal is, in not necessarily as high-stakes situations, but I'd argue that was kind of too little too late. It was a fun watch. I would have taken that before the tournament arc. I know why it wasn't like this. They wanted to set up the threat of the other students, and like Yuji needs to die, and that's a whole like part of the story, right? A whole big point, especially early on, and now they were going into season 3, probably gonna pick that back up again. Yuji is supposed to be executed, and thanks to Gojo that he's still alive and a student in the academy, but it feels like it sacrifices too much character potential, as in like the interactions and what they talk about, for the sake of making that plot work, where pretty much every other student is an enemy to Yuji at first. So when the tournament starts, you see all these guys, instead of thinking about their fun personalities or how they interact with the backstories, you're thinking about how they're all pawns trying to kill Yuji for reasons they don't really understand, right? Which, it is interesting, but it doesn't hit the same. The very final bits of season 1 I actually felt came together pretty nicely. We get to see a little bit more of the characters. Megumi's backstory with his sister was really interesting, and how he just snaps at that final fight there was really cool and really interesting, and actually got me decently hyped. Yuji questionings about killing someone who was not necessarily a cursed spirit, it's complicated, were also pretty interesting and built into his whole doubt, and they are sort of building up across the story, where should you kill people, which is fine, all his pressure he has between wanting to stay alive and wanting to help others, and how his existence is pretty much a threat to everybody. His conversation with Nobara about that was pretty interesting too, and felt like they were actually bonding. This is what I wanted more of, actual bonding between the characters. But it was still kind of, you know, just the end of the season. I enjoyed it, I was willing to keep watching, but I still wasn't getting the hype. Best characters in current shonen? I don't see it. Just comparing the setups for each story, you get to see that very clear, because, again, going back to Hunter x Hunter, we got the whole introduction, when Gon wants to find his father and become a hunter himself, and then you have Kurapika who wants revenge, yada yada yada, but this video isn't about that. Whereas in Jujutsu Kaisen, I mean, there's not that much of an emotional core that makes me immediately like grip to the characters and the stories. It's mostly like Megumi's story is just initially about living up to expectations and him being, you know, kind of closed off Sasuke type deal. So, like, there's not that much to grip onto beyond, oh, this character is kind of fun. Oh, this character has some cool powers. Oh, this was a kind of a sick fight scene. It was well made, it just felt like it needed more of an emotional core. Going into the movie, Jujutsu Kaisen 0, if you don't know, is a prequel to the main series, and it's not about Yuji and Ko. It's about Yuta Okotsu and his classmates, which happen to be the second year students from the main series, which are still in first year during the events of JJK 0. And man, what happened here? Because in the first 5 minutes, we already get the super tragic and emotional backstory to Yuta, where he's cursed by basically the spirit of his childhood sweetheart, and it's this whole thing where it's super tragic and emotional. And like, first 5 minutes of the movie, you're already feeling all the pressure this kid feels, where he's caused so many deaths and so much horror, even though he doesn't want to, and he tries to kill himself, but he can't. It's expertly done and super dramatic really early on, and I was like, what? Is this the same story? Because it already hit me with exactly the thing I was missing in the first season. This emotional core, this character motivation. It's not necessarily just tragedy or good stuff happening, it's both at the same time. You got to see how the cute little thing that happened in the kid's childhood ended up getting twisted. This dark curse that now forces him to do such terrible things. And it hits, it works, and it's not the same thing as like Yuji kind of randomly deciding to eat Sukuna's finger because, yeah, sure, whatever, right? You see how that's different? One is a curse stemmed from like emotional childhood trauma, and the other just, yeah, I'm gonna die, I guess I'm gonna eat this. It works in the context of the main show, but it's not nearly as gripping as what the movie did. The protagonist ends up becoming immediately more likable, the way he's awkward around these new students and he doesn't know what's going on. The introduction to the second year students, which again in the movie are first year students, already makes me care about them a whole lot more, because we see their dynamic with Yuta and how some of them are more accepting or less accepting of him, and how they treat him in his whole personal situation already says a lot more about their characters than whatever vague interactions they had in most of season 1. Each of them has their own little quote-unquote arc within their movie, where you get to see how they fight alongside Yuta and learn to accept him for who he is. And immediately I feel like I care a lot more about Maki and Panda and whatnot just from that alone. The backstories that were already there in season 1 are given a lot more time to breathe and attention through these proper introductions across the movie. Which is kind of funny because the movie is based on a manga that came out first before Jujutsu Kaisen itself was a thing. So I wonder what the correct consumption order for this would be. If you're reading the manga, then sure, start with the manga, start with 0. But if you're watching the anime, the movie does go ahead and does a lot of callbacks, or call forwards, I guess, to the actual anime, includes some characters, and doesn't take that much time explaining the mechanics, because it sort of maybe assumes you've watched the show before. So as far as the anime goes anyway, I really don't know what's the best course of action here. If you should watch first season 1 first, or if you should start with 0. I just know that 0 gripped me a lot more, and I think having that background, already knowing Maki, already knowing the guys from second year, knowing how Jujutsu Society actually is more closely, I feel like season 1 would have hit harder for me if I had watched the movie first. So I really don't know. But basically, it works super well as a self-contained story, and it had me cheering out loud by the climax, where I was super excited to see the conclusion to Yuta's whole story and him overcoming all of his trauma. It's genuinely super engaging stuff. And going into season 2, I was already, leveling my expectations again, being like, okay, the movie was really good, but maybe it was the outlier here. And I had my expectations, sort of leveled, sort of, okay, yeah, we're going back to normal Jujutsu stuff. We're seeing Yuji again. Sure, whatever works, works. And oh my god, it starts as a Gojo prequel. I haven't mentioned Gojo too much so far in this video, but Like, I gotta say, the dude is so awesome. He was kind of, you know, a bit one note in season 1 in the sense that he was just sort of like this cool, big, powerful dude. But he was a cool, big, powerful dude. So while his characterization maybe was a bit lacking early on, aside from the movie where they do some cool stuff, again, the movie really nailed a lot of that stuff. He was just kind of the cool dude I wanted to see more of. But actually getting to see his past and who he was as he was learning to control his powers seemed like a really exciting prospect. And it already got me started as I'm watching it. I was like, oh, Jujutsu Kaisen is good when it's not about Yuji, apparently. Because, oh my god, this arc is so killer. The de-escalation from fun to dramatic as the arc goes. We first see Gojo interacting with his classmates and how that works. Them doing simple missions, something that was supposed to be easy. It slowly starts to get darker and darker until the eventual, you know what, happens. And it works so well. It works so well. Immediately made me care a whole lot more about Gojo. Digimon reference happened too. That was cool. So yeah, it was working so well, and then when the sad stuff happens by the end, it hits so freaking hard. And the comeback from Gojo with the whole "I am the enlightened one" speech, just yes, so cool, so good. It worked super well, and it was super fun, super exciting. And just as I did, it was kind of cool to see the memes come to life for real in the show and actually understand them in concept. So yeah, that arc gets the biggest 10 out of 10 for me. Everything worked super well and was super exciting. Seeing Geto's descent as this whole ideology gets twisted into wanting to basically commit genocide against anyone who doesn't know how to control cursed energy. Amazing character writing. It's insane. It's so good. The hype I got from that moment, that singular hollow purple moment, is exactly what I was looking for in the entirety of season 1. I was seeing these well-animated action scenes. I was like, okay, this is good, but where is the character to you know, validate this? Where's the emotion here that's supposed to be beyond, you know, the existential threat of being killed and stuff? Where's the character stuff justifying this? And seeing Gojo basically go through simultaneous trauma and enlightenment at the same time as the kid they were protecting, and risking their lives to basically make sure she would live a happy life until the end, and even proposing the idea that they should disobey their superiors so she can stay alive. Like, that was going to work so well, and then she dies. Oh, it's so fucking good! So good! I love that arc. Going back into the Shibuya incident arc, of course, things were a little... Again, once again, I lowered my expectations going into the idea, oh, Jujutsu is good when it's not about Yuji. But I was still kind of excited. You know, it's kind of an infamous arc, even as someone who hasn't watched the show yet. I've heard a lot about it. I was really happy to be able to get to the arc so I could finally watch this video in particular. So I was, you know, kind of, you know, middle of the road, maybe expecting a lot, maybe not expecting too much, because you never know what's gonna happen. Mechamaru has a giant Gundam mech. I'm sorry, big explosions and goofy shit, cool goofy shit. Hell yeah! And it isn't even only that. Before that actually happens, there's this moment with Nobara and Yuji where they talk about going to watch movies and stuff, and it's another cute little interaction, more of what I wanted from season 1. Oh, maybe they were getting it. This is it. This is what we wanted. This is what I wanted. They're going to work on it more and make me actually care about the new Jujutsu crew. In the same way I already care about the guys from second year now, and even Gojo and his own classmates after the first half of season 2. And yeah, of course, Shibuya arc is infamous for a reason. It's payoff after insane review, after really cool fights, and then they finally do something with Gojo where basically like the payoff of this whole thing is, okay, so he was OP for the most time, but now you can't depend on him anymore. What you gonna do? Gojo is sealed. That is such a cool payoff. I feel like a lot of the weird pacing was kind of back, but this is a lot better. Naname's death was so well made and it felt justified. Like, it worked super well too. In contrast, and as an example of this weird pacing still sort of being here. Nomura's death I felt like could have been done a lot better. I said that in the beginning of this part of the season, we did get a little bit of more character interaction between Nobara and Yuji and Megumi, but I feel like, okay, sure, if you want to do this big arc where a lot of people die, sure, kill off one of the main three, that's fine. But the fact that it came so soon, and the fact that it basically had to take a half episode to make us actually feel something about it, like, goes a long way. Of course, like, by now, just by extension of being around her for the 1.5 seasons she's been around, you do get somewhat attached to her, but I believe even the writer realized that, oh no, we haven't done enough with her, because, like, a huge portion of the moments when she dies are dedicated to basically relaying her entire backstory to us, something that wasn't really reviewed up until now pretty much, and also giving us one last moment between Yuji and Megumi and her, just a cute little moment where they ruin one of Gojo's shirts. So, you know, it's basically these kinds of interactions I wanted to see more of during the main part of mostly season 1, that they're backtracking into Nobara's character right as she dies just to make us feel more of anything after her death. Again, weird pacing, could have done a lot better if you ask me. And even the ending of the season was a bit abrupt. Of course, that's not the fault of the manga, it's pretty much just the anime having to define itself. But I was genuinely questioning, okay, so I thought there was going to be another episode, but there just wasn't for some reason. But this also gave me the realization that quite a few manga are written sort of weirdly like this. Mentioning Hunter x Hunter once again, yeah, that also has this weird tonal shifts. I made a whole video about how it's a story that basically doesn't care about typical conditions or tone, it does whatever it wants, and I feel like it benefits a lot from that. But I feel like Jujutsu suffers more than it benefits because the weird outsider writing ideas it takes are maybe not necessarily just what I'm looking for, or feel like they affect the pacing more negatively than positively, if you ask me. Hunter x Hunter nails it a lot more by pulling the rug slowly, giving you the fun adventure story and slowly making you realize, no, this is messed up actually. Whereas Jujutsu Kaisen is so interested in the messed up stuff, then by like episode 5 or something, the main character already dies, you know? So I'm happy I finally managed to watch Jujutsu Kaisen and was thoroughly enthralled by the movie in season 2, and even season 1 was still pretty damn fun for what it was. So I cannot wait for season 3. Yeah, I'm still watching the anime, don't know if I'm gonna jump into the manga yet, especially when the anime is indeed so well produced. Even, you know, again, season 1, for as much as they did not care that much about the characters, the animation, the music, it all works super well, and I cannot wait to see what's next for this story and these characters, especially after the huge reveals and setup we got at the end of season 2. So with that in mind, thanks everyone for watching, and I hope to be right alongside y'all when season 3 comes out, so we can be hyped and watch together and see whatever crazy stuff the writer is gonna be up to. Thank y'all for watching, and see you next time!